Hey everybody, welcome back. Okay, so this will be a longer video last week, and because I have the last new thing to introduce to you, believe it or not, we're actually getting that close now. Sorry about that. I have the Everton game from Premier League soccer background, but anyway. Um, so I'm gonna talk to you about the feature assignment. So one thing I also want to remind you is that again, if you look at the rubric on the actually, I'll just share the screen right now. If you look at the rubric, you'll see that this assignment and the major assignment count more. This new assignment. So, before I'll get in depth, I'll talk about the data journalism assignment, which of course, those are rewrite due on that. But first some just preliminary stuff. Again, if you look at the modules and you look at, of course, that is the feature news module. If you look at the rubric and grading, this is again, we're going back to week 1, September 5th. You will see again that that really this is like Shay when I really want to see if like you got all the tools now, you've developed them in a progressive way, and we try to combine them all in basically the terms of the feature story, which again is going to be kind of similar to the bus reaction story you did, only it's going to be more feature oriented, softer story. Something that's written to be read is the phrase that actually is used in feature stories. Now, you remember the grading grade overall is 70% of your total grade. Okay. But within that 70%, again, this was the profile assignment, the first one, 9.1% of the 70. And this was the this is actually, people say it's funny. I want to make something clear also is that I actually have like a quiz requirement for this class, but I consider the two things as quizzes. I just make them regular assignments, and one is this one right here. This is the this is the leads assignment. Essentially, a question and answer kind of setup, where I provide the information, you provide the answer, and I grade it. That's the that's the but it's 9.1% of your grade. It's quiz like is what I'm saying. If you ever have anybody ever questions you whether like there's any quizzes in this class, is this one. And also I would say the data journalism assignment is a bit quiz oriented because you have to fill in the blanks for that one, which we'll get to. Okay, so this was the third assignment, 9.1% of your grade. This was the bus reaction assignment. Okay, and then this was the megalomania assignment. Well, really good work on that overall, I gotta say. Appreciate the work on that. I'm actually going to show you the I'm going to show you very soon the real life Marv Bronson. He was a guy who was actually the head of Tyco, I think it was in the late 2000s. And then 9.1% of your grade, that's the data journalism assignment. Again, we haven't finished that one yet. Now, and then the sixth assignment will be the feature assignment. See, now it's actually twice as much. I grade in progress, seen lots of progress. So this is twice as much as any of these individual assignments right here. And the major assignment, which I got everybody's idea and everybody's was approved. I appreciate that. That's 36.4% of your grade. That's 4 times as much as one of these individual assignments. So that's how that works. Okay. Any extra credit I get, I just basically add again, like I take all the points, basically a 0.5 is half of a GPA grade, right? So I just added 0.5 to basically the calculations I make here. Or if you have 2 extra credits, that's 2.5, so 1.0, that sort of thing. I could probably demonstrate that a little bit better. But anyway, so so this feature assignment weighs heavily. Okay. First, let's just go to the data journalism assignment first, actually. So, let's see here, actually. Sorry, just let me make sure I get back to where I was here. I got lots of tabs up, which is always a bad idea. But, all right, yeah, that's this one. Okay, so, all right. Now this is actually my teacher's view. This is not what you see. So, and of course I'm recording this over the weekend, so this stuff hasn't actually been posted yet. This is also the rewrite of the data journalism assignment that'll be due so this will be posted on the 6th. This sorry, the data journalism assignment is due on the 6th, so the rewrite will be due a week on Monday, November 13th. Okay. All right. So again, it was interesting. I had a when I did this for my in-person classes too, and people have a hard time. Like I think they're kind of almost like in disbelief that I'm actually giving them a template to write from. Okay, I want you to stay to the template. Okay. Another thing is another question I had somebody like come to me with a calculator with the tuition increases, saying like, is this it? And it was basically like what he did was he took all the tuition increases and added them together and said, is this the right answer? And I said, no, that's not the right answer. What I want you to do is it's a trending story. I want you to take the 5 tuition increases, including this year, because this is the most recent one that was passed. So that starts with 2019, 2020. Okay. These 5 years, and I want to know the individual increase for each of these years. Okay. The biggest one, oh, give you something away, was this most recent year because they're blaming it on the teachers. If you go check the university press release, arg. 6%. Ooh, I gave something away there. Anyway, so I also did the this is actually, you could just use this Microsoft Word document right here, but it has this on it. Put your name in, how many times, and then again, they usually typically cite some sort of generic reason for why they raise tuition what they do, every year. It's usually has something to do with unaffordability, trying to pay for a higher quality education. You can take that any one of the Rutgers releases. I provide the link to that. The Rutgers releases again. Don't forget that. That's on the Rutgers Today website. And you can use that information, for your you can use any of that information like immediately and just put it right into your story. It's not plagiarizing because it's actually there. This is how they communicate to the university. And again, you just go to the search engine right here. Okay. Oops. Tuition. You'll see all 5 of them going back to 2019, 2020. And of course, at least one of them was not an increase. Okay. And we go to this one right here. This just to give you one here. This is 2022, 2023 budget. They approved the 2.9%. So yeah, so you would list it as in that paragraph, the number, the percentage, and the year. All right. And then you see generic quotes in here, like this one right here. This budget will support a vibrant and enriching university experience, including world-class academic instruction opportunities, blah, blah. This is something when I ask for like a generic quote that will cover like why they raised the tuition number of years for in the last 5 years. You could use this as like your generic quote or something like that. Okay. All right. So anyway, all right. So going back to this, so this is the graph where you actually list the increases. Again, this is like people like lists. They want to see like where the trending. They want to see like where the things are heading. It's not heading in a good direction in terms of tuition. So what you do is again, you do X%. It says just university raised tuition, cite the tuition increases and the years. So you do X% in 2019, 2020, semicolon, X% in 2020, 2021. Or I mean, if it's actually there's a year where they didn't raise tuition, you just put it right here. You just say they did it raise it in all years except for this year or these years, right? And then you just list the years where they raised it. Okay. X% in 2021, 2022. I already just told you they raised it in 2022, 2023, X% in that year. That's all. Okay. You don't average them out. You don't add them together. You just do that. Okay. And then of course, you have this right here where you have, they did not raise tuition and in certain years, whatever year, for whatever reason, and you'll see there's a big whopping answer for that one. Don't forget, thank you for now I've seen a lot of good participation on the discussion point. Again, this is for the bottom of the story, just 2 or 3 people getting into some anecdotes here. Okay. Yeah, this is for the weather assignment. And but anyway, I got 11 here. Don't forget it, I'm looking at class participation. trying to look for somebody who maybe could talk a little bit about like a personal experience. Okay. Here's a good one right here. I am fortunate my family has money to put aside to attend school. I get nervous that the savings will start to dwindle away. It's a good personal experience right there. Okay. My feeling is that when you commit to a school, you put down the deposit, you expect the price. People care about the bang for the buck, you know? So yeah. So some good ones here. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. So that is the data journalism. And like I said, the rewrite will be due in a week on the 13th. Okay. All right. So now we go to the feature assignments. Yay. The last new thing to introduce. So it'll probably be the last really long video. Haha. Now I go to the module actually, because the module has some good information. Don't forget there are modules that actually guide you from topic to topic to help guide you along, let you know what's happening in the class. So what's a feature story? A feature story essentially is what we've been doing a hard news, we've been doing hard news stories, what they used to call daily news stories, traditional news stories, but giving them like a bit of a softer touch. Okay. And really that all that means is just basically like kind of doing what we've done before, but with a little more depth, a little more, dare I say, creative writing, but I don't want you to write creatively. Okay. Like in terms of like the typical creative writing. Okay. I want you to write, factual, keep your facts straight. Um, Feature writing, actually, I mean, you want to be accurate, clear, and focused, but maybe a little bit descriptive. That's the one thing I would add to it. And also, the big thing that also is different is that the way you introduce the reader to the story. It's a slower way of introducing them because it's actually what you're really trying to do is you're trying to write to be read. Okay, so you're trying to actually hook the top of the story. You're just not just blurting out the information as quickly as possible in a very quick, short lead. That's very concise. Actually, what you're typically doing is actually a several paragraph lead. This lead is actually typically several paragraphs. And it's kind of built in like a suspenseful way to try to hook you in. The very first paragraph actually doesn't necessarily tell you what you need to know. Okay. Because it's actually supposed to be suspenseful. It's supposed to kind of hook you in a creative way. So maybe you'll be interested enough and actually read the story. I like to say this is a story for people who have time to read. This is a story for the senior citizens or maybe retired or something like that. Or I like to say like, it's a story for the, if you're looking at like the traditional hard news story, the daily news story is for the person who's on the train, the commuter who has to read quickly and just reads the headline, the lead, and that's it. This is the story for the person who's going to the city and has time to look at their phone for a really long time, and then we'll read the whole story, and like the train's going slower and the whole thing, and they have time. Okay, so to your traditional news story, if you remember like the typical structure I went into, it was lead, okay, and then you have your transition, and then you might have like, if it's a regular news story, like a crime story, you might have like another transition. If it's something that's a little bit more in depth, okay, like we did with the bus reaction, okay, you would insert anecdotes, okay, anecdotes, or an anecdote, maybe another one, but then you would maybe have a quote. Then you would go back to the, it's not transitions, but a transition. You follow the same kind of format, but maybe like I said, maybe in these anecdotes, you instead of like just basically talk about the personal experience, you talk a little bit more about like the what become, or sorry, the where becomes a little bit more important in these stories because people want to read a little bit of description, get more of a sense of setting. This is the closest we get to essentially fiction or novel writing or creative writing or book writing or something like that in journalism. Okay, you might we're going to actually do a weather story. That's going to be your assignment. So you might want to like describe with the weather. You might want to describe what people are wearing, what the color of the leaves are, that sort of thing. I always do this story around a time like when the seasons are starting to change. So it's like, so you start to see there's actual visual signs or changes that you can insert into your story, that sort of thing. Okay, just don't go too wild. Okay, and remember, I can actually like detect AI. I think I've actually caught a few people already with AI. It's interesting because you could tell it's so obvious, and I won't say why it's so obvious, but I didn't necessarily punish them for it, but I just basically, told them this is totally unacceptable. I mean, if I keep seeing repeated versions of it, then yeah. Then maybe I will, but it's not allowed in this class. Okay. And then you got a quote, and then you follow, you follow kind of the same. This is the format we've been following. What's different between this and well, one of the big differences, I talked about description, yes, but probably the biggest difference is actually right here in the lead. Okay. So the lead actually becomes multiple things. I'm sorry, not transition. What you do is actually what you can do is you could take like maybe one of the anecdotes maybe you would have put down here, okay, and move it up here. And the anecdote becomes your lead. It's called an anecdotal lead, okay? So yeah, it comes an anecdote, okay? All right. And then the anecdote essentially is made up of a tease. That's usually like your first paragraph. It's a tease. It's usually something along the lines that's very vague, doesn't, but it's meant to hook you, meant to kind of like you give this in this case. It's actually wants you, makes you want to have more, makes you wanting to have more. Okay. Again, this is a story that actually takes into account the type of reader. It's not necessarily trying to attract the reader who wants just the daily quick stuff that we just post quickly on this. He wants the reader who actually will read from top to bottom. Okay. So they're gonna actually try to really like try to hook you in and suck you in and like with a fancy kind of suspenseful lead. People who enjoy that kind of thing. Okay. People have the time for that kind of thing. Maybe another tease. Okay. And then it comes in with what they call a nut graph, which is also another way of saying a delayed lead. That's actually the graph where you basically answer the question. It doesn't come in the first graph. It comes maybe like the third or the fourth or the fifth graph. That's the paragraph that basically tells you what the story is about. In a traditional news story, your lead by itself would be a one paragraph lead. It would just do that. In a feature story, you have one graph here. Well, let me get rid of this. Your anecdote would be like one graph here, one graph here, maybe even insert a quote right here, and then you get to what is called the nut graph. Again, that's the paragraph that essentially tells the story, what tells the people, what reader, what the story is all about. All right. So anyway, and then you actually you go back into essentially the same rhythm. Actually, the rest of the story is much like your bus reaction story. Only, like I said, there's a little bit more of an accent on description. Okay. So basically, okay. So what am I looking for here? I actually gave this example because we're gonna do a weather story. And I'll show you. But anyway, Johnny Brown. And I want you, when you do these anecdotal leads, really write this down. Really watch for this. I want you to focus on a single, the top of the story. When you do an anecdote at the top of the story, in every anecdote, you really should just focus on one person. Okay, people when they're told to already do like creative writing and feature stories, they're kind of like told like in grammar school and everything to write about a group of people. Like I'll see sometimes these stories start out by saying like you walk down College Avenue, you see a bunch of people walking around tired and limp and blah blah blah. That's like a very broad and sweeping kind of generalization way of kind of starting a story. It's not very good and doesn't read well. It's actually much better to when you do an anecdotal lead, to focus on or do any kind of anecdote is to focus on one person at a time. And the reason for that is if you have like a bunch of people, you can't get any depth. If you have one person, you can get depth. You can like dig more into their personal experiences because there's only one person you have to worry about. Okay. So Johnny Brown wears shorts in 32-degree weather. And then that's basically it. That's basically like your first paragraph. Okay. Maybe. Okay. Brown said he's protesting the cold. Okay. That's like another paragraph. So what you're doing is you're kind of leaving this is actually good. You're actually leaving the reader hanging, but but maybe you kind of like make it a little colorful here because and there's a little bit of description here what he's wearing because it makes you because it's kind of almost like a movie in a way. It's kind of like, oh my God, is he gonna freeze to death? Is he gonna have hypothermia? I'm not gonna be too dramatic here, but yeah, it kind of leaves you wanting to know more. Like, did he get hit by a car? Maybe if you actually said like wear shorts and 3 degree weather at the bus stop, one of the worst places to wear clothing like that because you get the wind always comes in like crazy, right? Um, so you don't really know what's going to happen next. Yet he's protesting the cold. Um, and then like a good colorful quote. Maybe I just can't stand the weather around here. He said. So this is basically the start of the story. How about that? It's longer. It's meant to hook you in. It's meant to kind of bring you step by step in a suspenseful way. And then you come to essentially the nut graph, okay, which actually acts, like I said, a lead, like what a lead traditionally would be. Only you try to blend in what's already been said, and you say Brown is among a number of Rutgers students, and we've had this lately, who are not pleased with the colder weather. And then maybe you kind of show like some sort of call to action or something like that. And they're um trying to get through it all or something. All right. So this is essentially what your story is about. It's just that we took a longer time to get there because we're trying to hook people in with suspense, leave them wanting, leave them kind of trying to guess or whatever, like what's happening, that's a good thing. Okay. You could actually like make this a story if you actually even took out this part right here. It'd be like essentially, you could actually start the story by saying that, you know, but we wouldn't want to do it. We'd be a little bit more creative if I use that word. Okay. Johnny Brown wears shorts, 30-degree weather. Said he's protesting the cold. Just got cast. Blah blah blah, and then you head into the story. Okay. All right. And I said like one of this maybe the descriptive things that you would add is maybe like what people are wearing. Maybe he's wearing short shorts. I don't know, 80s style. You know, that makes other people look at him like, what the hell are you doing? All right. All right. I actually give like I have a video that I give out, and I can actually show it in the class eventually, a later video or something like that. But where I take like, there's going to be a discussion point for this assignment we're doing, okay? But this is where I basically like show you how I take information from a discussion point and turn it into a feature story like the one I just did, like the one I just did. But anyway, so anyway, let me just show you actually other examples right here of a feature story. This is right here. All right, so this is actually the New York Times. A lot of times you don't, it's funny because of, smaller staffs of the traditional newspapers and everything. You actually are not seeing as many feature stories as you used to. Now they're just kind of, I think it's kind of like, dare I say, Twitter. So the social media mentality is that you're just trying to get the news out and that's it, that sort of thing. And again, people don't have as much time as they used to. They're working from home and the whole thing. There's like there's no clock that stops. So, but they do try to actually, you know, get something in there that maybe like a lot of times these stories are done as not the breaking news stories. Okay, this is not the Marv Bronson story. This is actually, sorry, my son has COVID, so I have to check in with him every once in a while. So anyway, um, anyway, so there was a few years ago, there was like an ongoing story about Somali pirates, as they call them, who were taking over like boats and ships and that sort of thing, and like stealing and robbing things. So what they did was you could do like a follow-up or a sidebar. It's usually not the main stories of these feature stories, something like that. It's usually something that actually follows up and provides a little more depth to a story that's kind of ongoing, or maybe something maybe people forgot about or whatever. And again, trying to provide additional depth and information to the story that otherwise wouldn't be there. So when you actually look at the story, you'll actually see that, you know, the first couple of paragraphs actually do not talk about, there's a headline, right? Somali pirates are kidnapping, and then a Facebook message, even that's a little vague. But this is going to be about a story about a guy who bonded with somebody, um, who I believe was a Somali pirate, if I can remember correctly. So anyway, it starts off by saying Somali pirates kidnapped and held Michael Moore, a journalist, hostage for 2.5 terrifying years until a ransom payment secures release in 2014. So that kind of leaves you hanging, but it's not about that. Okay. 2 months later, Mr. Moore received a surprising message on Facebook. It kind of leaves you wanting. It was a little bit vague. It's not everything's in there, that sort of thing. How are you, Michael? The message said, I am your friend Mohammed Tahil. I wants to speak with you. The center's Facebook page included his photograph. Mr. Moore recognized him as one of the men who guarded him during his captivity in Somalia. He decided to write back. Okay. What followed? So that basically it was all kind of like, oh my god, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna like hurt him? Is he gonna like come after him? Is he gonna try to find out? You're gonna try to beg him for money? What's wanting, suspenseful. But then comes in essentially the nut graph. What followed was an extraordinary exchange of Facebook messages between the journalist and former character. How long they communicated and where the conversation ultimately led has not been made public. But in the summer, the Somali was taken into custody by United States authorities and jailed in New York City. Okay. Um, so basically, essentially, like, became kind of like this thing that basically like led to a conversation, but then it also led to an arrest. So that's basically what the story is about. That was about this kind of like interesting kind of reunion between two people who were adversaries, and then how it led to an arrest. So, you didn't really maybe see that coming when you first saw these first few paragraphs, but that's what the story is about. Okay. And then what the rest of the story will essentially do is deconstruct everything that happened. Okay. So I provide that anecdote. Actually, I'm sorry, anecdote. I provide that example as a link in the actual um, module. Okay. Now, the book, I asked you guys to read chapters 8 and 12, which I will talk about, but I feel like they don't really do a great job in, like, I have to admit, the book and like really just talking about what feature stories really do. So what I did was in the module, I actually, besides this video right here, I actually gave you um the basically like from an older textbook, basically I think a better description of what a feature story essentially is. So differentiating feature stories from news stories is misleading. The two actually have a great deal in common. The difference is emphasis. It's true. The styles that are commonly used for feature stories assume that the reader has more time to read. They will require a central theme. The writer must be able to summarize the point of the story, but the writing may require that the reader go further to fully understand the point of the story. Okay, so yeah, you basically have to go further because you're going through this anecdotal lead that kind of leads you in a suspenseful way. Okay, the characteristics to the reader, the feature story seems to be more of a relaxed style writing. Oh yes, than a news story. It may be easier to read. I mean, typically magazine stories are this. Okay, feature writers work just as hard. However, you still have to get news and the facts and adjectives. Don't get crazy about adjectives. Beautiful, glorious. No, nothing like that. That doesn't change. But you would maybe want to use adjectives in the story, only that you have to keep the adjectives factual. Okay. Like if you're going to write about the weather, you'll write gray sky. The gray is an adjective. Okay. Or maybe like, if there's like damp weather or something like that, or like flooded streets, something like that. If we had lots of rain or something like that, or like maybe like you could see the breath come from his mouth. Stuff like that is actually good descriptive writing, but it's factual. So that's when you would actually like maybe like get adjectival. Okay. Um, all right. So this talks about the parts of a feature story, which is similar to what I showed you right here. It's also called a narrative lead. Um, so what you would have essentially is this. They also call them transitions, but not just teases, but so you describe the dramatic point of the story. In that particular New York Times case, it was getting the Facebook message essentially. And then creating narrative suspense with foreshadowing. Yes, basically there's a little bit of like cliffhanging a little going on. Then the nut grab, give the theme of the story, and then you essentially provide the supporting graphs, much like you would in this story, which starts with a traditional news lead where you give the who, what, where, how, why, when, and then you provide essentially again more depth about what happened, that sort of thing. All right. I show examples right here. I know this is a little bit hard to see right here, but maybe basically a type of story that really gets featurey. I'm not asking you to do this. We're basically like, yeah, I can't even like really kind of zoom in there. Maybe I can. Um, uh, Yeah, it's really blurry. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to actually. um, hold on 1 minute. Ugh. Okay. Okay. Anyway, the nut graph, like the lead in an inverted pyramid story, the nut graph is a paragraph that gives the theme of the story and summarizes the key facts. Unlike the leading inverted pyramid format, however, it's still an inverted pyramid, but just in a different way. The top is different. Nut graph is not the first paragraph of the story. For the council story, so anyway, I don't want to get confused with anything else. So they carried, here's a good one. They carried knapsacks and bags to tote loot. They had a screwdriver to pry open doors and windows. My God, what are they going to do? That's what you want people to ask after each paragraph. They use latex gloves. See this nice little short paragraph right here, this drama, okay? This is why I ask you guys to write, don't rely on quotes so much, and please do not rely on direct quotes in this so much on this story. You can use them, yes, but that's not feature writing. It's just basically just saying, here's somebody's quote. That's not feature writing, okay? Somebody's like really long quote. No, that's not color. That's just doing the same thing I said before. You want to use your own writing to basically use your own words to basically show drama, show creativity, show action, that sort of thing. Describe what people are saying, okay? Just like we did with the bus reaction story. They acted like criminals, but officials say they were teenage burglars, coached and directed by a Palmer woman whose son and daughter were part of her gang. So this actually is a nut graph here. Actually comes pretty quickly. So basically, it shows this thing like, oh my God, what is this? Like the old TV show, It Takes a Thief or something? Oh my God, you're gonna like, is this that Brad Pitt movie? What is it? From I forget the one from Las Vegas. No, it's just a bunch of kids actually, or led by a woman. There's just supposed to be kind of like an aha or like surprise moment, maybe like when a nut graph finally comes, So I provide like again like some comparisons between the straight lead and the anecdotal lead in this from different websites and everything that I've shown you before. Okay. All right. So what is it that you're actually doing here in terms of a story assignment that'll be due in 2 weeks? Which is November 20th. Yes, I realize that is actually Thanksgiving week. Okay, but you can get it done by November 20th. That's fine. And then the rewrite for that will actually be due a week later. I don't know. I mean, I'll see about that because I realize that's right around Thanksgiving weekend, and I don't want to kill you. Okay, because I know you're going to probably have like family and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, I also want to make sure that we also concentrate on the major assignment at the end of the semester and getting that ready and getting that done. Okay. And I talked last week about that. If you haven't seen that video yet. But anyway, but first, as far as we're concerned, this sixth assignment, feature assignment, which again counts twice as much as any individual assignment prior. What I want you to do is write a 500, 800 word story. And in this particular case, I just felt it was better to actually put this on a Microsoft Word doc, the instructions. So we'll bring that up right here. And did I put November 20th? I think it's actually November 20th. Actually, I'm sorry. Actually, this is actually from my other class, which is on Tuesday. So they're doing November 21st. I'm sorry. This is you. You're November 20th. Okay. So for this assignment, you'll write a 500 word story that will require you to flex your creative muscles. You're required to use an anecdotal lead with a nut graph. These leads, again, describe action in narrative form, okay, much like a book would. The narrative brings you a nut graph, which ultimately answers this question: what is this story about? Make notice of the details you see. What are people wearing? Is it cold outside? Can you see their breath? Is it raining? People look tired. Try to be funny if you can, but not crazy, okay? And even show irony is actually a really good one usually because this one I use Walter Shrub. Wore sandals as he rode the bus. It was warm. That's one paragraph. It was cold, but on Tuesday he was wearing sandals. I am protesting the cold. I hope God sees us, or at least Mother Nature. So yeah, that's actually kind of describing the changeable weather, okay, that we have around here. We had like an 80-degree day like last Saturday, and the next day it was like 40, So that's actually another thing you could probably theme your story around because we have so much unpredictable weather going on right now, although it's actually been cold for a few days straight. So then you get into the nut graph, which explains what the story's all about. That essentially will be the consensus. What you're going to do is you're going to actually interview I want you to interview really like Rutgers students or like people in the area. But if you don't live at Rutgers or something like that, then maybe just interview people in your typical area. If you're international students, same deal, obviously. Okay. Interview people about the weather and the changing seasons and how it's impacting them, and write a 500 to 800 word feature story on it. Talk to them about the weather and how they're adjusting. Describe the color of the leaves, the grass, the sky. This is where you get into a little bit more of the description. Write a story about how people appreciate or don't appreciate this time of year. Are they going outside? What do they think about the cool weather? I've had people write about how they do appreciate it. Yeah, I've had I'm not, I think the majority theme of this story I've done over the time, over years, is that off and on, is basically that people have mixed opinions. So this could be like a mixed opinion story. Rutgers students have mixed opinions about the weather, or weather changing, blah blah blah. Because you have some people who are like really like into winter and like skiing and that sort of thing that's coming up. So they'll you'll have that kind of person, that sort of thing, or maybe they just don't like it being too hot. Because when it gets hot around here in New Jersey, it can get like really hot. Please use anecdotally, like we talked about in class, to focus on one person's experience anecdote, like I talked to you before, with the weather before going into the nut graph. Okay. Here's one big thing that I noticed, and I had to put a note on it in recent years, because do not, you want to just concentrate on people's personal experiences. Let's not turn people into scientists. Okay. For whatever reason, I have had, and I understand, but I've had people like, um, go off on climate change in this story. Okay. Okay. That's not really the point of this story. The point of this story is, how do people adjust to the weather? I realize that, like, I mean, people have concerns about climate change. My daughter and myself have very much concerns. My daughter is afraid that we're going to be underwater by the time she's 50. So, I don't know. So I realize that's a big issue of concern, but I'm not asking people to analyze climate change in this story. Okay. That's actually something also totally different kind of story. I mean, if I were to, if I wanted something about climate change, I would do an actual story about climate change. Okay. And how people feel about it. I think a couple of people have actually are writing about that for their major assignment, and I approved it. But that's a separate story as far as I'm concerned. Okay. What I'm looking for is just basically like a story about the changing of the seasons, what's happening right now. I think right now, what's happening right now, I haven't actually seen, like, other than that 80-degree day last week, any kind of like major signs of actual climate change. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. One thing that we haven't seen in recent years, we haven't seen a lot of snow. I know that. So in New Jersey. So anyway, so that's the deal, is that just really just kind of focus on, you know, people's personal experiences. There's probably no personal experience that's more like emblematic of like what goes on in New Jersey, that sort of thing, than like, what do I wear for the day? Like, especially if you're like on campus or something like that. And I don't know, you guys are taking this online class, maybe it's not an issue, but it's even like, what am I what am I gonna wear like outside? That sort of thing. That's actually like one of the biggest issues you have to make all day. Because like sometimes like right now I'm feel comfortable with this. I'm wearing my pullover sweatshirt, but I've there's been some days where it's been 42 in the morning, and then later in the day it's like 70, and I'm still wearing this, and I'm sweating, and it's icky and gross. So it becomes like actually like a big decision. It's not a decision that like impacts like global warming or that sort of thing, but it's like something important like that. But it's a personal decision you have to make every day, and it's not always easy to make. So okay, and I actually write it in here too, basically. But first, I have a discussion point actually, and that will be, again, I'm actually doing this video before Monday. So so basically this discussion point has not been posted yet. But basically what it does is it's going to be pinned. What I'll do is I'll move down the other one that's already up there. Actually, I meant to pin this one already. Let me just pin it now. Again, it's not published yet. It'll be published on Monday. How do you feel about the weather at Rutgers, or if you live far away, wherever you live? Okay. Not worded very well, that question, is it? But I mean, wherever you live, it could be like Piscataway or New Brunswick too, but I'm talking about it. Please give your opinions here, but also please provide an anecdote too, such as talking about a particular moment or day, or choosing clothes. This is where I'm actually asking you guys to not be reporters. okay, and help other people out, help a fellow person out, and basically be a source, just like we've done in the past. Just like and don't forget, there's also a discussion point for um the data journalism assignment, okay? But anyway, still not over yet, but so I'm gonna ask you to do the same thing, basically like provide information. Maybe people have trouble driving in the weather and that sort of thing, just personal experience. Don't quote yourself, please. Okay, don't like use your own quotes. Okay, so basically something people can use for their feature assignment, particularly at the top of the story where there's an anecdote. Okay. Actually, I really actually meant to put the paragraph, put the parentheses actually at the end of this. So anyway, so yeah, so this is, I mean, you don't have to use this stuff for the for your story. You can interview other people, you know, that sort of thing. If that's easier, that's fine. Sometimes we've had situations where every time I have the discussion point, I gotta say in this class, started off slowly, and then when people actually, there are a couple people who get it in early, provide a lot of depth or like anecdotes, stuff like that. Please do, okay. Please get something in there as early as possible so people can get working on this, okay. All right, so that's the next assignment is your feature assignment. Um, and I'm going to talk about the book in a little bit and how they talk about feature different things that relate to the feature assignment. But again, so we have the fifth assignment. I'm going to post this on Monday. The fifth assignment. This is everything, by the way. Everything's going to be posted soon. That every writing assignment for the semester, believe it or not. So you have the data journalism assignment due on Monday. Rewrite will be due a week from Monday on November 13th. The feature assignment will be posted. It'll be due on November 20th. And then, of course, after that, at this point, I'll let you know if I'm going to change this date because it's Thanksgiving week. But the sixth assignment rewrite of the feature assignment as of right now is November 27th. Of course, we already did the major assignment proposal, but now we have the major assignment that'll be due essentially like a day or a day after the last day of class is December 13th. Okay, don't forget about that one. Okay, I got everybody's in. All right, so what are the chapters that relate to feature assignments? Well, there's actually, these are the last chapters I have asked you to read, chapters 8 and 12. And one of them is, again, is the alternative leads, where they show you like different ways where you could basically like enter into a story and maybe like in a more magnetic, like kind of like hookish way. So a summary lead basically about a smoking ban. This new smoking ban took effect Monday at Baltimore, Washington Medical Center that ends the use of parking lots and outdoor shelters by smokers. Okay. Me, alternatively, gonna kind of back into it in a suspenseful way. Terry King's Monday morning might have been rougher than just about anyone else's. Again, leaving a hang. What happened? Did he get shot? What happened? My God. Not only was it the first day of her 16 years of Baltimore's Washington Medical Center, she couldn't light up, but her job required her to remind her that the entrance was about the new smoking policy. Okay. And then you probably would have a nut graph right after that basically would talk about, again, probably be similar to what this summary graph would be. Okay, new smoking ban took effect, blah, blah, blah. All right, but the story is really about typically these stories are about people's reactions to some event that's going on or something like that, a major news event or whatever. Okay. All right. All right. So, buried or delayed leads, the nut graph essentially comes in a little bit later. So basically that's essentially like, what it is. It's also called as a buried or delayed lead, where again, they leave you wanting. Okay. It didn't take long for Mark Toigo and Jay Chattel long to realize that they had brought in an aerodynamic pile of junk. They had paid $75,000 to a aircraft broker, blah, blah, blah. It was a sight unseen deal. What happened? They didn't get a look. This is a really long one. Until they ventured to a Brazilian Air Force base outside this place. Now they apparently, this plane is actually flying. How about that? That's interesting. So they went through this whole thing where they like went through like all sorts of like trouble to get this thing going, and then it actually is flying, and that's the big shocking surprise. Okay. Suspenseful leads. I mean, I've talked about that. And descriptive leads. I mean, I don't want you guys to go crazy. I just really want something that basically like, show like a little bit of description, that sort of thing. Like, again, clothing, trees, that sort of thing. Sometimes like, I mean, a weather story is not necessarily going to lead to a shock or a twist unless something happens that's crazy. Next, I've had that. We had like weird, like the year we had a snowstorm on Halloween. That was like a weird one. So that was a bit of a led to a shocker. Sometimes they're ironic. They build up like a sort of, sometimes what they do is it's good to show irony in these sort of things where you maybe like when you're building up people with those teases, you're kind of like showing them like you know one thing that you're kind of teasing people to believe one thing is going to happen, then you come in with a nut graph and it's actually something else. Like, it's ironic. It's good to maybe like surprise people because like you would in a movie, a good movie. All right. There's actually a feature story section. Okay, almost everything one sees, this is chapter 12, has a story behind it. Journalists just have to open their eyes and ears. Feature writers find ideas by being curious and observant. News writers may provide spin-off topics to store first feature. So yeah, that's what I was saying before, is like, it's actually, usually it's like a good extension. Like, I always also use the example of like, I saw this one story where there was like a train crash. What they did was they focused on one person's personal experience, and it was a woman who was pregnant and she was fine, but basically it was just like the harrowing kind of suspense that went up that led up to like the train, after the train crash and when she got help, that sort of thing. So these feature stories kind of lend people the opportunity to kind of like read more in depth and see personal experiences. Okay, ending of a feature story, just basically, let's don't no conclusions, just basically you just end the story like you typically would. you know we would have, I always do a profile story as our first story, but I mean, I do that because I try to keep things simple and that sort of thing. But if I were to go back and do it, I mean, I wouldn't change it, of course, but I'm just saying that if I were an actual editor, I would actually make that, I would actually ask you to make that into a feature story where you would have something suspenseful at the top of the story, because those types of stories, the bus reaction story probably would do the same thing. But at that point, I was trying to just keep things simple. Okay. Um, they talk about like different types of features here, historical features. I once did a historical feature on the end of the end of the 20th century. Basically, I read about the Wright brothers. I mean, it was weird. It was when we had time to do this kind of stuff and give us the opportunity and the money. So I was actually working on a paper in Pennsylvania, and they actually like sent me down to North Carolina to write about, the 20th century's over. What were the significant events? And I actually wrote about how Kitty Hawk is still like cares about the Wright brothers and that sort of thing. So how to do it features, like you can see stories like that and like how to build something. And you see that like a lot of magazines, concerts, you know, that sort of thing. Okay. I also give the example of like a magazine story. It's funny, it's like they always call it, this is the greatest story ever told, but actually, sorry, I had it up for a second. But actually it's you know, the you know, this is the only, this Esquire magazine saying that, and they're the ones that did the story. So okay. Um this is interesting because I'm not asking you to write a magazine story. Now, I just want to just show you that basically magazine stories follow this kind of style, okay? But they have very long paragraphs often, that sort of thing. So I'm not asking you to do that. But this is just to give you an example of like, how this structure like works and how it's applied to like essentially make magazines. It's also to give you the idea like you're writing to be read. It's taking a really long time to come up, but this is a story written by a writer by the name of Gay Talese. I actually got to know him a little bit because he actually lives in the area of Atlantic City, or actually grew up there or something. I mean, he might still live there. I don't know, but anyway, he wrote about Frank Sinatra having a cold. And I'm sorry, this is taking a really long time to come up. Here we go. So anyway, I mean, there's like this is a bit of a dated story, so he uses words like blondes and stuff like that. But again, the whole idea is suspense. You could like divide these into individual small paragraphs and it would have the same effect as like a news story. But this is a magazine story where the paragraphs are longer. So you can see there's like, what's going to happen to Frank? I hope you all know who Frank Sinatra was. He was a famous singer, passed away about almost 30 years ago. Frank Sinatra holding a glass of bourbon in one hand and a cigarette in the other, sitting in a dark corner of a bar between two attractive and fading blondes. I think the idea there was they were trying to show the culture and like what was going on there and how he perceived things through his eyes at the time. Who sat waiting for him to say something, but he said nothing. He had been silent during much of the evening, except now in his private club in Beverly Hills. He seemed to grow even more distant, staring out through the smoke. Um, there were friends of his nearby. Sinatra had been working on a film he now disliked. I mean, the point is basically, yeah, here you have a guy who has everything, he's acting like he has nothing, or he's under threat, or something like that. And he was known to have like some mob ties and that sort of thing. So who knows, you know. He could not wait to finish. He was tired about publicity dating the 20-year-old Mia Farrow, now is 70 something, is active on Twitter. He was anchoring CBS television documentary of his life to be shown in 2 weeks, which was reportedly prying into his privacy, his friendship with mafia leaders. He was worried about his starring role, blah, blah, blah. Sinatra was ill. That was the big thing, though. He was the victim of an ailment so common that there's an interesting ironic twist that people would consider it trivial, but that the Sinatra can plunge him into a state of anguish, deep depression, panic, even rage. Frank Sinatra had a cold. So the irony there is something so benign and that sort of thing. Although in recent years, it's not so benign, but this is what it's about. Now, this is where it gets to with like a nut graph. Okay. So what is this story about? It's about how Sinatra with a cold is Picasso without paint, Ferrari without fuel, only worse. For the common cold robs Sinatra of that uninsurable jewel, his voice, cutting into the core of his confidence as it affects his own psyche. Sinatra with a cold in some ways sent vibrations through the entertainment industry. It can actually affect the whole industry. And beyond Australia, as a president of the United States suddenly sick and shake national economy. Okay. So that's basically why it makes it sound so trivial and it's so something huge is going to happen, but it's this. Essentially is your nut graph. Okay. All right. So that's your feature story. Try to get those discussion points in if you want to like get some additional ideas and like how to like incorporate those discussion points. I can also show this in a later video, but this is actually a video for that. It's actually in the assignment entry itself. Okay. All right. So that's our new assignment, the feature story. So anyway, let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if there's anything that you know, you have any. I mean, I haven't had any like kind of like I only had like a few like I only had a few sorry, office hour appointments in this class, that sort of thing. I mean, if you need an office hour appointment, please let me know. I mean, I'll do it on Zoom and we'll do it. All right. I haven't seen much of that, so you know, class participation, man. If you're having trouble, let me know. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys, and let me know if you need anything.